Hi, I'm Daniel Cunningham, founder and CEO of Leonardo 24/7. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what is property management. When I think of real estate property management, I really think of it as kind of two buckets. And the first bucket is what most people think of. And that is those activities that are surrounding what we sometimes refer to as the resident life cycle. So front and center in property management is collecting rent. That deals with residents. You need to lease those units to start with. So there's a leasing and there's a marketing component. So property management needs to involve, competent marketing so that you can drive leases and maximize your rent. Setting rents is a big part of property management, figuring out what the market rents are, doing market surveys, and things that surrounding the mechanics of what it takes to get units rented. So there's screening residents and making sure that units are rent ready and able to show, and turning units quickly so that when somebody leaves, 5 days later, you're ready to bring somebody else in and move into that unit. So those are the real basic blocking and tackling people think of when they think about property management. But there is what we think of as the asset life cycle, which is frankly just as important when it comes to preserving asset value, when it comes to minimizing costs and expenses, when it comes to reducing operational risk. And it doesn't get as much attention as the resident life cycle does. But the asset life cycle in property management involves things like preventative maintenance, not just responding to work orders, but getting involved in preventing equipment from breaking down in the first place. So there's a preventative maintenance schedule that should be happening for every piece of equipment and amenity that you have on a given property. There's risk mitigation. You want to prevent operational risk. You want to prevent property risk by making sure the property is maintained properly. So for example, before the rainy season, you want to make sure that you've inspected all the roofs, right? So make sure you're not getting leaks. So there's property risk you're trying to mitigate. There's liability risk, slip and falls. When you're a property owner, it just kind of comes with the territory that you have a lot of people on your property and they will fall and they will trip and they will do things that maybe you don't think they should be doing, and they will blame you for it. So mitigating that kind of risk is part of the asset life cycle. There's things that you need to be doing that are beyond just preventative maintenance, like you want to inspect and make sure that lighting systems are in good condition. You want to inspect and make sure that the tour path is in good condition so that when people do come to the property, they're having a good experience when they see the property. You want to make sure that the model unit is ready. So there's this asset life cycle that really centers on what are the characteristics of the asset. If you have a pool, there's things you need to be doing. If you don't have a pool, you don't have to worry about it. If you're in a cold climate, there's different things you need to be doing for that asset than if you're in a southern climate. And so Leonardo 24/7 tends to focus on that piece because it's less well understood. It's more about prompting people to do the right thing at the right time with the right form or the right inspection they need to be using, and not about interfacing with a resident. And it's sort of the understated portion of NOI that, if it's not done properly, can slowly eat away at that NOI because you're experiencing higher equipment costs, you're experiencing more lawsuits, you're experiencing greater inefficiencies because your folks on staff aren't necessarily doing the thing they need to be doing next. And that's where we step in and try to solve all of that. The operators on site, what they get in trouble for typically, they get in trouble when occupancy dips. They get in trouble if they don't meet certain goals with respect to achievable rents. They get in trouble when units don't turn quickly and you've got downtime. What tends to get ignored, and so it tends to get ignored by operators, are things like preventive maintenance that frankly you can ignore with zero ramifications until the one day that you can't. And you have a major breakdown of a piece of equipment, and now suddenly there's hell to pay, right? Now suddenly people want answers. How did you ignore this? How did this happen? I've seen that firsthand when I was on the operator side, and I've been the victim of that, and I've been on the receiving end of those questions. How did you let this happen? And the honest answer is, it's easy to let those things happen if you're not paying attention to it. If you don't put some import on it, it can get ignored for a long time until suddenly it can't be ignored anymore, and now you've got a problem, and now you're costing the company money in the form of a major equipment breakdown, in the form of a lawsuit, in the form of units that don't get rented because they're not being marketed properly and on time. And Leonardo 24/7 is there behind the scenes to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. We're like your sidekick on site saying, hey, remember, you have to do this, you have to do that. I know there's these important things over here. I know the dog in 102 is barking and you've got to make that resident happy, but you also have to make sure that the water treatment system is getting chemical treatments on time. Otherwise, all of your systems are going to get gummed up, right? And now you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses that are easily avoidable, but sadly, oftentimes they're not, because it's just not top of mind. And the industry has tried to accommodate this sort of dichotomy, this sort of tension between what people feel is urgent and what actually is urgent and important. And the way they try to accommodate it is to train people. We will train people on what our standard preventative maintenance is, or we'll send them off to be educated on what proper preventative maintenance is, or we'll create a policy that lists all the risk management tasks we want people to undertake in a given time frame. And the problem is there's a lot of turnover in this business. So number one, you can tell people all of that, and 6 months, 18 months later, they're gone and that institutional knowledge is lost. Secondly, even those folks that are well-trained and well-intentioned can get distracted. And if you don't have a way to measure and track that it's being done, then you don't really know it's being done. And if you don't know it's being done, it's probably not being done. So that part of the property management life cycle, the asset life cycle, is what we focus on. We're trying to bring greater focus and insight into how well properties are doing and keeping up that important part of being a good steward of an asset. In property operations, if you've ever been on site, it feels like everything's urgent. Like there's not a day that there's not something that right now could take your time because it feels like it's urgent. It's a stressful environment. And because everything feels urgent, the not urgent but important things really get short shrift. And some of the things that feel urgent have nothing to do with actually maximizing the value of an asset. It just has to do with placating somebody who's loud. But the asset ultimately suffers if you can't bring some focus to those things that are important, but not necessarily urgent. They need to be done this week, this month. We help define that. Part of the Leonardo 24/7 setup is an account manager that works with an implementation specialist and our client to look at their policies and procedures, and that works to identify those things that are important and then what kind of schedule we need to present. It's not something that needs to come up every day or every week, but maybe once a quarter or maybe once a year, there's something that's important that needs to be done. And if it goes on for too long without it being paid attention to, eventually you run into a problem. So that's the magic really in the Leonardo 24/7 setup is these things that are a little more esoteric, that aren't top of mind, but are still important. You can build those into your system, and then one day they just show up, and now they get done. Because it's like we're giving guidance to folks on site who are really heads down on the problem of the day, and then we say, well, here's something you probably didn't think about, but it's important. It's important because it's important to your owner, or it's important to the management company, or it's important to your insurance agent, or it's important because it's a municipal code, but it's important, and it's time to take a breath and pay attention to this thing, and we will help you. We'll tell you how to do it. We will give you guidance if there's a certain form or process you need to follow, and then whoever else cares that thing is done, we can let them know, hey, they got this. We got them, they got you, because they've put that into the Leonardo 24/7 system. At this point in our evolution in property management, hopefully everybody's using some sort of software at this point to be managing the property. The question is, how does the right piece of software really improve property management? Because in the 80s, we saw the early introduction of rent rolls, digital accounting, and then it took until the 90s before we started getting into things like work orders. And only in the last 10 years have we seen things like marketing go digital and and cloud-based software allow owners access to the financials that their property management company typically maintains. So what software can do now, or what software should be doing for you now, is first of all providing transparency between the operators and the owners. Unless you're owning and operating, even then there's some disconnect sometimes between the site and the corporate office. But what software can do is provide real transparency now. So real-time access to the financials, real-time access to look at how the property is performing, real-time access to what your trend is with respect to leasing. And that kind of real-time financial data really helps the relationship between an owner and an operator. So I think that's important. Our goal is to provide consistency. So the more you can automate processes through software, the more you can reduce reliance on people's memories or even their training, the more you can automate that, put it into a system that then gives guidance to the people that are on site, actually turning the wrenches and doing the work, then you get greater consistency. You can have real accountability, and you can give visibility into that those things are really being done, and that they're being done right. They're being done at the right time, and they're using the right process, the right form. And really, you need software to provide that kind of structure and to be able to automate those things. Ultimately, what software does in property real estate management is it reduces your risk. Anytime you're sort of leaving things up to human, we're fallible. We're not all-knowing. We don't know it all. We certainly don't remember it all. So to the greater extent that you are shifting the burden from the operational procedures and tasks that need to be completed, the greater you can shift that burden from somebody's memory to a process, to a piece of software, to a platform that can deliver that information to the right person at the right time. The greater you can do that, the less you're leaving yourself room for risk, the less you're leaving yourself open to lawsuits, the less you're leaving yourself open to balls getting dropped that matter when it comes to marketing and leasing, to resident satisfaction. And that is important in property management. So in every case where Leonardo 24/7 is deployed, there is a property management system in place, a PMS in place. And we work alongside of them as a standalone, kind of must-have other operating system for property management. So PMS systems are what we think of as being resident focused. The property management systems that you most commonly think of, are based on accounting at its core, and everything that's built on top of the accounting platform. So, what are the leases? What are the rents? Have they collected that rent? Who wants to lease? Have they been screened? Those things are all encompassed in a good PMS system. Leonardo 24/7 stands alongside of those to do everything else that needs to happen at that property, to facilitate everything else that needs to happen at a property to be a good steward of that asset. So when you're not responding to a work order, or you're not trying to lease a unit, and you're not collecting rent, what else should you be doing in the life cycle of that asset? And we facilitate that. We give guidance as to what those things should be, when they should happen, what form they should use, what inspection process they should follow. And then oftentimes the results of that, pushing back into the property management system so that you can collect that data there. Really, we serve to be the single source of guidance for community operators that should outline everything that they should be doing on a daily basis, right? And part of that laundry list of things they should be doing, a subset of that are work orders. So there's proactive things that we're encouraging them to do that come from LEO, that come from their policies and procedures. That's proactive. But there's a reactive piece, which comes from work orders. A resident has a broken pipe that needs to be fixed, and that needs to be collected and presented by LEO to our users to say, hey, here's everything you need to be doing. And those pieces, the work order piece, when that's finished, when that's completed within LEO, we want to push that back into the PMS system, because the PMS system is typically the system of record for the maintenance that was done at the property or the work orders that were completed. So that's one example. We also have move-in, move-out inspections that are completed in Leonardo 24/7. And those are triggered by, in your PMS system, when somebody says, hey, I'm going to move out. So you change the status of a unit from occupied to on notice. That then communicates with Leo and says, hey, you need to perform a move-out inspection. And if you did a move-in inspection, we want to compare the move-in to the move-out and see what resident charges might be applicable in this case. So that happens in Leo, but then the charges that result from that move-out inspection then flow back into the PMS system. So that's another example of how we stand alongside of them. We are able to do and complete inspections in Leonardo 24/7, and those inspections, the results of those inspections can be stored in the PMS system if there's a place for those. There's a lot of data that we collect that doesn't really have a home in the PMS system. I think that was one of the things we recognized when we were starting the company, is there are a lot of things that we're focused on that are more operational, that are more procedural. They're about workflows and processes you want to follow that PMS systems don't contemplate, because they're focused, again, their bias is the accounting platform and tracking those kinds of things. Thinking about how to run the property is not on their radar. So that's why we're so important, I think, to sort of a very holistic property software solution, is you need to have the operations piece to stand alongside your property management system and pass to the PMS system, in those cases where it's applicable, the data that you're collecting on the operations side. I'm fascinated by the evolution of the PMS systems in real estate property management for a number of reasons. Number one, the players in the PMS system have vastly different personalities. I don't mean people, I mean the software, have vastly different characteristics. And it's interesting to see why a company migrates to one or the other. Second is, there is so much inertia in having a PMS system installed that the amount of effort it takes to convince a property management company to move off of one PMS system onto another is Herculean, right? It takes a lot. It's like stripping white from rice, and yet it happens. And it's interesting when something is compelling enough to force a property management company to do that. And I'm always interested in what that is. And I would say, generally speaking, as I understand it, some of these companies are not public, but so we don't really know. But generally, Yardi and RealPage split the market in multifamily. MRI, Appfolio, Entrata, Resman are all excellent, really viable solutions, but they don't dominate the way that Yardi and RealPage do. And it's not because necessarily that Yardi and RealPage are the superior solutions. Entrata came along and I think offered, I think their value proposition was a more highly evolved, easy to use technical solution. But that didn't mean that people automatically were going to drop their prior provider and move to Entrata. I think it's been an uphill battle for them, but it's a fantastic, great product. For us, we started our integration with Yardi. That was the first PMS system that we integrated with. So first of all, that's because we have a lot of clients that use Yardi. Probably the majority of our clients are Yardi clients. But also I think that even though Yardi is an extremely robust system, and I think in some instances it might be the most robust system in terms of what can be done with it, I think many of our clients don't always take advantage of all that because it can be a little more difficult to use than Leo, which is a little more out of the box. The user interface, I think we've given some thought to making that really easy to get up and running. And so our clients that are Yardi clients that typically get a lot of value right away from having Leonardo 24/7 in place. We really are filling a void in their operational platform. So this is Daniel Cunningham with Leonardo 24/7. Thanks so much for listening.